Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram, Jaya Lalita Vishaka Jaya Radhesham, Jaya Lalita Vishaka Jaya Radhesham, Lalita Vishaka Jaya Radhesham, Jaya Gaura Nitai, Jaya Gaura Nitai, Jaya Gaura Nitai, Jaya Gaura Nitai. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jayom Vishnu Pad Paramhamsa Parivrajagacharya Stotra Tatra Shishan Mangresa Bhaicharanavinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Śrīla Prabhupada Ki Jayom Vishnu Pad Paramhamsa Parivrajagacharya Stotra Tatra Shishan Mangresa Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosvāmī Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Granta Raj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the Son Devotee. All glories to the Son Devotee. All glories to the Son Devotee. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriyet Nastaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhavati Bhaktir Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Hare Krishna, everyone. So, thank you for this opportunity to discuss this most glorious Srimad Bhagavatam. So today we'll be reading from the 10th canto, chapter number 29. Text number 13. The title of the chapter is Krishna and the Gopis Meet. Śrī-śuka uvāca uktam purastād etat caidyaḥ siddhiṁ yathā gataḥ dviṣann hṛṣīkeśaṁ Kim utādhokṣaja-priyāḥ śrī-śuka uvāca uktam purastād etat caidyaḥ siddhiṁ yathā gataḥ dviṣann hṛṣīkeśaṁ Kim utādhokṣaja-priyāḥ śrī-śuka uvāca uktam purastād etat caidyaḥ siddhiṁ yathā gataḥ dviṣann hṛṣīkeśaṁ Kim utādhokṣaja-priyāḥ Śrī-śuka uvāca. Śrī-śuka uvāca. Vaishnavis? Śrī-śuka uvāca. Śukadeva Gosvāmī said, uktam, spoken, purastād, previously, etat, this, te, to you, caidyaḥ, the King of Cedi, Śiśupāla, siddhiṁ, perfection, yathā, as, gataḥ, he attained, dviṣann, hating, api, even, hṛṣīkeśaṁ, the Supreme Lord Hṛṣīkeśa. Kimuta, what to speak then? Adhokṣaja, to the transcendental Lord who lives beyond, to the transcendental Lord who lies beyond the purview of the ordinary senses. Priyāḥ, of those devotees who are very dear. Translation and purport. Śukadeva Gosvāmī said, this point was explained to you previously, since even Śiśupāla, who hated Krishna, achieved perfection. Then, what to speak of the Lord's dear devotees? Please repeat. Śukadeva Gosvāmī said, this point was explained to you previously, since even Śiśupāla, who hated Krishna, achieved perfection. Then what to speak of the Lord's dear devotees? Purport. It's a little bit of a long purport. Although the spiritual nature of the conditioned souls may be covered by illusion, Lord Krishna's spiritual nature is omnipotent and is never covered by any other power. In fact, all other powers are his energy, and thus functioning according to his will. The Brahma Samhita 544 states, Shristi stiti pralaya sadhana shakti eva, chayeva yasya bhuvani viparti durga, ichana rupam api yasya cha chetastasa. The mighty Durga, who creates, maintains, and annihilates the material world, is the potency of the Supreme Lord, and she moves like his shadow, according to his desire. Thus, because the Lord's spiritual influence does not depend on whether someone understands him or not, the gopis' spontaneous love for Krishna guaranteed their spiritual perfection. The great Madhvacharya quotes the following relevant passages from the Skanda Purana. Krishna kamas tada gopyas tyaktva deham divam gataḥ samyak krishnam parabrahma gyatva kalat param yayu. At that time, the gopis who desired Krishna gave up their bodies and went to the spiritual world because they properly understood Krishna to be the supreme absolute truth. They transcended the influence of time. Purvam cha jnana samyuktas tatrapi prayasastata atastasam param brahma gatirasina kamataha. In their previous lives, most of the gopis were already fully endowed with transcendental knowledge. It is because of this knowledge, not their lust, that they were able to attain the supreme Brahman. Natu jnanam rite moksho nanya pantiti hi srutihi kama yukta tada bhaktir jnanam chato vimuktaha. The Vedas declare that without spiritual knowledge there is no valid path to liberation. Because these apparently lusty gopis possessed devotion and knowledge, they achieved liberation. Ato mokshe apitasam cha kamo bhaktya nuvartate mukti shabodito caidyaḥ prabhratro dviṣa bhaginaham. Thus, even in their attainment of liberation, lust followed as a manifestation of their pure devotion. After all, what we call liberation was experienced even by the envious person like Śiśupāla. Bhakti margi pratam muktim agad Vishnu prasadataha kamas tvachobo krishchapi bhaktya Vishnu prasadakrit. By the mercy of Lord Vishnu, one who follows the path of devotional service gains liberation as a byproduct, and such a person's lusty desire, which would normally invoke misfortune, instead evokes the mercy of Vishnu when exhibited in pure devotion. Dvaishi jiva uttam chapi bhaktim Vishnu vimochayet ahoti karuna Vishnu Śiśupālasya mokshanat. Lord Vishnu will save even a devotee possessed of an envious life. Just see the extreme mercy of the Lord as shown by his granting liberation to Śiśupāla. Śiśupāla was Lord Krishna's cousin. He was mortified when the Lord stole the gorgeous young Rukmini, who Śiśupāla himself was hell-bent on marrying. For various other reasons also, Śiśupāla was consumed with envy of the Lord Krishna. And finally, he insanely offended him in the great assembly called the Rajasuya sacrifice. At that time, Krishna nonchalantly cut off Śiśupāla's head and gave him liberation. Everyone present saw the effulgent soul of Śiśupāla rise out of his dead body and merge into the existence of the Lord. The 7th canto explains that Śiśupāla was an incarnation of a gatekeeper in the spiritual world, cursed to take birth on the earth as a demon. Since even Śiśupāla was liberated by the Lord, who took into consideration the whole situation, then what to speak of the gopis who loved Krishna more than anything? Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So I'll just reread the verse again. Śukadeva Gosvāmī said, "This point was explained to you previously. Since even Śiśupāla, who hated Krishna, achieved perfection, then what to speak of the Lord's dear devotees?" Hare Krishna. So I'd like to beg the blessings of all the assembled devotees and senior devotees so that we can have a fruitful discussion today on this very wonderful verse. I have no qualification to speak, which will become evident here shortly, but I will try to repeat what has been spoken by our previous acharyas and other senior devotees so that we can understand this pastime. So again, this is 10th canto, 29th chapter, verse 13, Krishna and the gopis meet. So, if a very illustrious brain surgeon were to come and give us a discussion on how to conduct brain surgery and all the detailed steps, what tools were used, how the procedure will be done, will any of us ask any questions? Will any of us draw judgment and say, hey, how come you didn't do this and why didn't you do that? Will any of us question any of that? Why? Because we don't have qualification to know anything about brain surgery. But when it comes to spiritual topics, we all form opinions. We all form judgments. We all have an idea and an opinion. But the question is, do we have the qualification to form those? And this Rasa Lila pastime is very, very important for us to understand where is our knowledge level. Akin to whether we would comment on brain surgery or not. Are we qualified to comment on this Rasa Lila? I certainly am not. This pastime is not very easily understood, but it is very easily misunderstood. And so for this purpose, we have to be very, very careful. And Srila Prabhupada tells us towards the end of the final chapter in this 5-chapter sequence in Krishna book, he says that we must hear through Guru Parampara. This is the means to be able to hear and understand this pastime. But otherwise, it can become very dangerous for us and quite destructive. And so, we may then wonder, well, if this is, such a difficult topic to understand, maybe beyond our purview, then what is the benefit? Why not move on to another topic, the next topic in Srimad Bhagavatam, and save ourselves from this? So, Śukadeva Gosvāmī, at the end of this, gives a very wonderful reason why it is important to hear this pastime. I just wanted to read this verse that I presume will be read in some time in the future, but it's a very sweet verse in which he's offering a great benediction to those who hear about this pastime. And he says, this is the 39th verse of the 33rd chapter, anyone who faithfully hears or describes the Lord's playful affairs with the young gopis of Vrindavan will attain the Lord's pure devotional service. Thus, he will quickly become sober and conquer lust, the disease of the heart. So it's a very wonderful benediction to be able to attain pure devotional service and to conquer over our material contamination. Srila Prabhupada comments in Krishna book on this verse. He says that, pure devotional service is completely free of all material contamination. And the most dangerous aspect of our material contamination, lust or sex life, is what he says. And so it is a great benediction, but we must hear, again, in the mood of just hear, take the commentaries from our acharyas, and thus we can make progress. And this benediction is very important to us. This lust is the weakness of heart. Marketers, when marketers try to market and promote their product to us, right? They try to penetrate our mind, overtake our intelligence, and convince us we must have their product. And so how do they penetrate the mind? They have to find a weak spot. And what is the prominent weak spot that all marketing agencies do? They use lust, sex life, to try to attract us to their products. I was recently seeing an advertisement for a casket company, where you'll go when you die. And who was modeling this casket? A beautiful woman. So this lust, it is a weakness that society tries to exploit upon all of us. But to conquer it for all of us, this is a great opportunity to hear and to read these pastimes and to understand them. But we should do it, again, in a very, in the mood that Srila Prabhupada explains for us. Hearing from our prior acharyas and understanding it through their lens, not through our lens. Because through our lens, it's like trying to understand brain surgery. It's not going to happen. And this is Srila Prabhupada's continued brilliance. His explanation of this pastime in Krishna book particularly really answers all of our questions and provides us a holistic understanding to be able to understand the intricacies of this pastime. And so that really is all we have to do in order to grasp that. So coming now to the verse that we have here, in the prior verse that we heard yesterday, Parikshit Maharaj asked this very important question. And of course, he was asking for the benefit of all those who were in the assembly who had the confused look on their face. And he was asking that how did the gopis become free from material desires through their lust for Krishna? You know, lust is one of the enemies, right? One of the 3 gateways to hell. We know in the 2nd chapter, Krishna explains how lust is a cascading effect where it leads to anger and then delusion and bewilderment, loss of intelligence, ultimately our fall down. So this lust is very dangerous for us. But then Parikshit Maharaj saying, well, how is this lust actually leading to the liberation of these gopis? That was perplexing to him. So now in this verse, Śukadeva Gosvāmī answers. And he chastises. He says, right? He says, this point was already explained to you. And he references the explanation in the 7th canto regarding the liberation of Śiśupāla. So he's saying that you should not be asking such a question. If Śiśupāla, who had hatred for Krishna, was liberated, then what to speak of the gopis who were expressing their lust in favorable mood to Krishna? Then how that could not be possible? And so he is lamenting. And of course, as we saw in these verses from the Skanda Purana, that the gopis' lust is very, very different from our material lust. This lust was actually a product, an outcome of their Krishna prema, of their pure love. So miles of we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Just related to this comment about Śiśupāla, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur makes a nice commentary about why Śukadeva Gosvāmī has referenced Śiśupāla here. You know, why is he not referenced, a prior demon, like Aghasur or someone else? He went back to the 7th canto and went forward to the Mathura Lila to discuss this pastime of Śiśupāla. Why? Because it carries a very confidential parallel to what has just happened. That the gopis who were held back from going to the Rasa Lila, left their bodies and were liberated. And Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur comments that Śiśupāla actually also, when Krishna released his Sudarshana Chakra, it was not killing Śiśupāla. It was actually attacking the sins of Śiśupāla, which then purified him, and he achieved also his pure eternal state and his position as doorkeeper in Vaikuntha. We know Jai and Vijay were cursed by the 4 Kumaras. And so there was the chakra of Krishna who destroyed those last remaining residue of sins so that Śiśupāla could achieve his eternal spiritual state, just as the gopis did. And so for that reason, Śukadeva Gosvāmī is bringing this example in particular up to draw that parallel, again, according to the commentary of Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur. Okay, so with that introduction, let us get into the heart of this of today's discussion, and the heart being the appropriate place. I thought we could explore, the purity of heart that the residents of Vrindavan have, particularly the gopis, and how we can try to apply that purity in our own actions. Of course, we can never imitate the level of their purity, but if we can draw some lessons from how they perform their service to Krishna, we may be able to apply it in our own effort and thus make some progress in this path of pure devotional service. So we'll talk about 4 things, time dependent. We'll try to get to the 4th one. But first, just establishing a baseline of this madhurya rasa, this rasa of conjugal relationship, to help us understand how elevated this is in comparison to some of the other rasas. We'll talk about lust versus love. Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami and Chaitanya Charitamrita gives us a perfect definition, a line of demarcation that is black and white into what is lust and what is love. So we'll talk about that. And we'll talk a little bit about envy. This question of envy came up a few classes ago, and so I thought we could talk a little bit about envy and how the devotees in Vrindavan, they are completely free of envy, and how we can also try to become free of our own envy, because it is envy itself that brought us here in the first place. So we must purify of that to go back home, back to Godhead. And finally, this concept of servant to the servant to the servant, dasa dasa, the anudasa dasa. How to follow and how the residents of Vrindavan show this same mood to all of us. Okay? So the first, in Madhya Lila, in chapter 19 and 20, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is instructing Rupa and Sanatana Goswami. And in chapter 20, in the instructions to Sanatana Goswami, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is talking about this concept of perfect, more perfect, and most perfect. Now that's kind of perplexing for us, right? Because if something is perfect, it's perfect. How something can then be more perfect? But then even more, most perfect, then is perfect not, right? We start to draw. This is our material mind. But in the spiritual realm, this dynamic exists. And he explains that Krishna is perfect in Vaikuntha Loka. He is more perfect in Mathura and Dwarka. And he is most perfect in Goloka Vrindavan. And what is the criteria or the metric by which we evaluate perfect, more perfect, and most perfect? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explaining that it is on the transcendental qualities of Krishna. In Vaikuntha Loka, not all of the qualities of Krishna are manifest. In Mathura and Dwarka, the more perfect, all of the qualities are manifest, but not in their full potency. And then in Goloka Vrindavan, the most perfect realm, all of Krishna's qualities are in full display. And thus, the relationship between Krishna and his devotees in Vrindavan is of the most intense mood, is the highest of intensity. But we should be careful in understanding this to not think, or to think that, Vaikuntha Loka is something lesser, or it is perfect. It is perfect. But the highest perfection is this land of Goloka Vrindavan. And so related to that, in the 19th chapter, in instructing Rupa Goswami, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explaining about these different rasas, the 5 primary rasas, the relationships the devotees can have with Krishna. And in the first relationship, this Shanta rasa of neutrality, there is basically, one understands their position as servant, but there's an impersonal realization of the Lord. And so that is the level of service. But as one matures into dasya ras, or one goes further, one begins to understand this opulence, this awe and reverence of Krishna. And that inspires some active service. So this brings us to this dasya rasa. From dasya ras, one goes to this sakya rasa, this friendship. Here, now one removes this awe and reverence, and one has this confidence of fraternity, this equalness with Krishna. Sometimes they render service to Krishna, sometimes they take service from Krishna as friends with the Lord. Well, this mood intensifies further into Vatsalya rasa, where now one goes, we started in this awe and reverence to equality, and now there's this feeling of maintenance, that one is maintaining Krishna. There is intense mood of, I am sometimes even having to chastise Krishna. Of course, Mother Yashoda performs and Nanda Baba perform this pastime very perfectly, this mood. And then finally we reach this Madhurya Rasa. And this is where all the different relationships of all the prior 4 relationships are in full display in the most intense way, in which the devotee gives themselves fully to the Lord in service. And so this is explained to be the highest of all rasas. But similarly, they are all perfect. All the rasas, all the relationships with the Lord are perfect. But in this Madhurya Rasa, it has the most intense mood of devotion, and thus it is the most pleasing to Krishna. And that's why Śukadeva Gosvāmī sings that this Jayo Jayo Jvala Rasa Sarva Rasa Sar. He says this Madhurya Rasa, it is Sarva Rasa Sar, of all the rasa, the most elevated. Parakeya Bhave Yaha Brajate Prachar Braja. It is in Vrindavan where it exists. So this is just a little bit of context to understand when we think about the pastimes of the gopis. They're coming from the highest platform of the relationship with the Lord. And so when our mind may perceive things that are a little off, we should understand it is through our lens that we may perceive that. But the gopis of Vrindavan are performing the purest and the most beloved service to the Supreme Lord with the most intense of devotion. And so, we can understand how high this devotion is. Does a rich man, do they have any ability or inability to repay their debts? If you're very wealthy and you have a few crores of debts, is it difficult to repay it? No. Even if you have a few millions of dollars of debts, if you're very rich, you repay it easily. Well, how wealthy is Krishna? Unlimited. He has all opulences in full. And what does he say at the end of this pastime? Not the end of the pastime, one of the chapters in the reuniting. I cannot repay the debt of your love if I had the entire duration of Brahma's lifetime. I cannot repay this debt. So this is how wonderful and how valuable Krishna, how much value Krishna puts on this service, that he himself could not repay this debt. So now let's talk a little bit about love versus lust. In the 4th chapter of Adi Lila, Śukadeva Gosvāmī gives us this very exacting distinction between what is lust and what is love. And it's very simple. Activities in which I am attempting to please my own senses, lust. Activities performed to please Krishna's senses, love. So every day, we have only 2 choices. Am I going to please my senses, or am I going to please Krishna's senses? That's it. And one is lust, which leads to this cascading effect of our destruction. And the other is love, and leads to eternal perfection of life in bliss with the Supreme Lord. And the choice is ours. Lust or love. And simply my senses or Krishna's senses. And that is our choice. And the gopis, we know, their love is of utmost purity. Their only desire is to please Krishna. And we also had this pure love. But what happened? It transformed into lust when we came in contact with the material world. When we come in contact with the material world, our pure love that is lying dormant within all of our hearts has been transformed into lust. And it is through the process of devotional service that we are trying to undo and bring it back to its original state. And we see that the devotees of Vrindavan, they have this mood. When the cowherd boys, when they go to the forest to enjoy with Krishna, they're not going to enjoy with Krishna. They're going to give Krishna pleasure. to give Krishna the happiness of having friendship relationships and sporting in the forest. They're not going for their own enjoyment. When Mother Yashoda is, performing her motherly duties to Krishna, she is not doing for her enjoyment to be the mother of Krishna. She is doing to give Krishna the happiness of receiving motherly affection. Similarly, when the gopis are going to the rasa dance, they're not going to enjoy themselves. They're going to give Krishna happiness. So the whole mood in all of Vrindavan is to give Krishna happiness. There is no self-interest. As soon as there is self-interest, out. We have no place in the spiritual world if there is self-interest, because everybody is 100% centered on Krishna's happiness. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we get elaborate and wonderful examples of this. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, in explaining the confidential reasons for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance, it's a beautiful chapter, the 4th chapter of Adi Lila. And he talks about how the extent of this selfless service. And he's describing that Srimati Radharani, when the ecstatic symptoms manifest in her from the happiness and bliss of devotional service, she begins to resent them. She tries to suppress them. Why? Because they disturb her ability to serve. When her eyes are tearing, she cannot see clearly in executing her service. When she is trembling in ecstasy, she cannot perform her service so well. We are begging, when will my eyes be, filled with tears? When will I feel this ecstasy? But Srimati Radharani is trying to suppress it. She is worried that when she cries, her eye ointment will run, and then Krishna will not have such beauty to look at. This is the selfless nature. And what happens? Krishna becomes so pleased in seeing this selfless mood. And when Krishna becomes so pleased, Radharani's happiness goes even higher. And there is this competition. And who wins? Radharani. So much so that Krishna says, okay, I have to come and experience this highest happiness. And thus, Gauranga Mahaprabhu comes and manifests. So to explain why Krishna comes, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is using this extreme selfless mood of service and how it yields the highest happiness to Krishna and even the highest happiness to the devotees. So what does this mean for us? Okay, this is great. This is very interesting, but what does it mean for us? What it means for us is we can ask ourselves, when I'm dressing the deities, am I dressing them so others will comment on how beautifully we dress the deities today? Or am I dressing them to try to please Krishna? When I'm cooking something for Krishna, and am I cooking something for Krishna that so when the devotees honor, they'll tell me how great those samosas were, the best they've ever had? Is that why I'm doing it? Or am I doing it to try to please the Supreme Lord? I experienced this, I've seen this, at least in the U.S., during festival times in the kitchen, there's a competition for cooking for the Lord. And while we bring knives and cutting boards out, we also bring out our elbows. And we try to elbow our space to say, I'm going to make these, I'm going to make this, and you don't make that. And we start, making space in the plate, making sure my offerings get on the plate. Is that what Krishna is going to eat? What shows up on the plate? No. He says, Patram pusham phalam toyam. But yome bhaktya prayachati. There must be love in that. This pastime of Karmabai, her khichdi. She was making this wonderful khichdi. But she had no understanding of etiquette. But she had love. And she would make this khichdi unbathed, without purifying the kitchen. And this khichdi was so tasty that Krishna himself would come every morning to eat this khichdi as a young boy. And when she moved to Puri, Lord Jagannath would leave the altar in the early morning hours and go to Karmabai's place to eat this khichdi. One day, when Brahmana saw how she was preparing this khichdi, and he told her, you have to first bathe, clean yourself. Then you have to do some puja. Then you have to clean the kitchen, chant some mantras. Then you can cook for the Lord. She had no idea. Being a very humble servant, she started following. So she started taking bath. But that next morning, Lord Jagannath came from the altar. And he's knocking, where's my khichdi? Where's my khichdi? Karma is saying, wait, I'm taking bath. Taking bath? Why are you late? Then a few minutes later, she's knocking on, where's my khichdi? Where's my khichdi? Wait, I'm purifying the kitchen. Goes on. Finally, Lord Jagannath gets his khichdi. And he eats quickly. And he's got to run back to the altar. Why? The pujari is about to open the altar. And the pujaris open the altar. They see Lord Jagannath there. And there's a little bit of khichdi in his mouth. They say, hey, we have not brought the offerings yet. How you've got? And they explained who is giving him khichdi. To this day, before the Chappan Bhog reaches, what is the first thing that's offered to Lord Jagannath? This khichdi. It didn't show up on the plate in Lord Jagannath's altar. He went to go get it because it was made with love. So our service, when we perform our service, we should think, am I doing it to please the Lord? If it is, it's perfect. Doesn't matter what else happens, whether others appreciate it or not, whether it ends up on the plate or not, it doesn't matter. Because if it is done with love, Krishna will come and find it. And that's how he performs. And so we can try to perform our service in this way, being introspective. Why am I doing it? For myself or for Krishna? If it's for Krishna, it is love. Otherwise, it is lust. So the third topic here is envy. What is envy? Jealousy is, I have an iPhone, you want an iPhone. That is jealousy. I heard this explained by Borijan Prabhu. But envy is a step further. It is more evil. It is, I have an iPhone, you want it, but you want the iPhone and you don't want me to have it. So not only you want to enjoy what I have, but you don't want me to have it. That is envy. It's very evil, very deeply rooted. And we had envy ultimately of the Supreme Lord. And if we see the pastimes of the devotees, particularly again in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we see this mood. When Rupa and Sanatana Gosvāmī go to Ramkeli and they meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it is an exquisite exchange between Rupa and Sanatana Gosvāmī and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They are expressing their complete humility to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and it is so genuine and deep that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, stop, you're breaking my heart with your humility. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu bestowed so many blessings upon them. And receiving this great interaction and blessings from the Lord, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami makes a beautiful statement. He comments that all the assembled bhaktas who were observing this, what was their mood? Ecstasy. They went into ecstasy seeing Rupa and Sanatana Goswami receiving this mercy from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What is our mood? Sometimes we see maybe our spiritual master giving mercy to somebody else and we think, what about me? Why not me? Instead of celebrating their success, their grift, we think, that's envy. When we can't celebrate someone else's success, that is envy. But we see the devotees in Gaura Lila, they're always celebrating the success of others. Haridas Thakur, at the end of the Gundicha margin pastime, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is honoring prasadam with all the devotees. And Haridas Thakur is outside. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was calling him, Haridas, Haridas, come. Haridas says, no, I cannot come. But what was Haridas Thakur's mood? Being left out from this elaborate, wonderful scenario of honoring the most opulent Jagannath Prasadam with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. He was in ecstasy, seeing the bliss of the devotees, enjoying opulent prasadam. Sometimes there's special prasadam in Balaram Hall, right? And maybe we're not able to go in. What is our mood? Are we celebrating the opulent prasadam the devotees are able to get? Or are we thinking, why not me? Why not me is envy. Why not me is envy. And we don't see this in the mood of the pure devotees. So by studying them, we can try to find how we can bring this envy out of our heart. Even Srimati Radharani herself, in Antya Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita has this glorious example after example of these mood. But when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is describing the Shikshashtakam prayers, and particularly the 8th verse, he explains his mood to Srimati Radharani. She says that if another gopi can please Krishna more than me, I will take her by her hand and take her to Krishna. This is selfless service, free of any material desires, any personal desires, any envy. So how do we detect our envy? Simple. Do we celebrate others' success, or do we lament or think, don't they know about that person and what they all did? What is our mood? In that way, we can try to become free of envy. I'll just wrap up with this, a little bit about this, servant to the servant to the servant. You know, the principal mood here is who can please Krishna most. In the spiritual world, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is describing, we don't race to serve Krishna directly. Why? Because better than me serving Krishna, who can serve better? Srimati Radharani. So let me facilitate and assist Radharani in serving Krishna. Why? Because my goal is not where is my line in the service. My goal is Krishna's happiness. So let me serve. But I'm serving Srimati Radharani, Lalita and Vishaka are they're better, let me serve them. And we ultimately get somewhere way down in the bottom. But it is not bottom. Why? Because our goal, again, is not where am I in this pecking order. It is, what can I do to facilitate Krishna's happiness? And if our central goal is Krishna's happiness, then one actually feels complete satisfaction and happiness, regardless of where one is serving. And so this is our opportunity to think, when we are given some service by management, given some service by our, someone who's guiding us, are we lamenting, I want this service or that service? Are we thinking, this is my opportunity to contribute to whatever is happening for the pleasure of Krishna, surrendering our own desires and requests and sometimes even demands. In festival days, again, speaking from, in the U.S. when we have these festivals, there's more devotees cooking in the deity kitchen for the deities than for the devotees. But are we dasa, anudasa, dasa or not? Where is the better opportunity for us? Right? So this opportunity to, pick services in which we can focus on Krishna's pleasure, it'll also give us more satisfaction and less lamentation. Right? So we can evaluate our mood. So in conclusion, these mood of service is very high. And if it feels like we're a long way away from there, congratulations. It means we're being honest with ourselves. That is step one. Being honest that, yes, I have a long ways to go. But step two is taking the potency of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He came to teach us this specific, highest mood of service. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami tells us, whatever is really difficult, it becomes easy if we take the shelter of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So if it seems very difficult, very far for us to reach this high platform, good, we're being honest. Next step, take shelter of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and follow his instructions. Chant the holy names nicely and sincerely. And in time, we will make progress towards this. And I just wanted to conclude with reading a couple of verses. These verses show, we talked a lot about how the devotee is completely given themselves to Krishna. And these are some of my favorite verses, but they speak about how Krishna feels about his devotees. So this is from 9th canto, 4th chapter, and this is when Durvasa Muni goes to Krishna and is trying to become free from the offense to Ambarish Maharaj. Krishna says, sorry, I can't help you. And this is what he says. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said to the Brahmana, again Durvasa Muni, I am completely under the control of my devotees. Indeed, I am not at all independent. Because my devotees are completely devoid of material desires, I sit only within the core of their hearts. What to speak of my devotees? Even those who are devotees of my devotees are very dear to me. He says, O best of the Brahmanas, without saintly persons, for whom I am the only destination, I do not desire to enjoy my transcendental bliss and supreme opulences. He doesn't even enjoy his opulences without his selfless devotees. I'm just going to read one more. My devotees, who are always satisfied to be engaged in my loving service, are not interested even in the 4 principles of liberation, although they are automatically achieved by service. What then is to be said of such perishable happiness as elevation to a higher planetary systems? The pure devotee is always within the core of my heart, and I'm always in the heart of the pure devotee. My devotees do not know anything else but me, and I do not know anything but them. This is the beautiful two-way street. Krishna is giving himself completely to his pure devotees, and his pure devotees are giving themselves completely to Krishna. And this is what we can try to take away from this highest mood of bhakti that is shown in this Rasa Lila pastime. So in just quick summary, this Madhurya Rasa, it is the highest of all rasas. So let us not try to interpret it as we cannot interpret brain surgery with our limited knowledge. Lust versus love. My senses or Krishna's senses. 2 choices every day. One leads to our ruination, one leads to our perfection. It is our choice. And we must try to become free of envy. It is so evil. Not only your enjoyment, but I don't want myself to enjoy it. It's really bad. Celebrating the successes of others is a means to start to bring that envy out of our heart. And finally, servant to the servant to the servant. Take whatever service we get and work towards the pleasure of Krishna. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki. Any comments, questions? Thank you. Yes. Prabhuji. Yes, Prabhuji. There's a question in the middle. The microphone is coming.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, I want to ask that how can we reduce our sleep time and improve the quality of sleep?
How do we reduce the... Well, I was going to talk about habits because New Year's Eve is coming, or New Year's is coming. So I'll talk just briefly about this. So habits, Stephen Covey in the 7 habits of highly effective people gives this really nice 3-part paradigm to how to build good habits. We need 3 things. One, we first must know what is it that is good for me? Right? Is sleeping less and rising early good for me? Yes. So we need to know what. Then we need to know how. How to do that. That is your core of your question. But then we have to have a strong desire for it. When these 3 things intersect, what is good for me, how to do it, and a strong desire, then the habit can be formed. So when we're struggling to form habits, we should diagnose, where am I missing between these three things? Because one of them is missing if the habit is not forming that we wish to form. Chanting our rounds early in the morning. I know it's important to me. I know how to do it, but maybe I'm missing desire. Sleeping less. I have a strong desire for it. I know it's important to me, but maybe I don't know how. This is your question, right? So to form good habits, look to these three parts and figure out where are we missing, and then these habits will form. And note, to form a habit, the first days of that habit are the hardest. When the Apollo mission went to the moon, or so-called moon, I won't get into that, it consumed 97% of its fuel in the first 3 minutes of flight. This is analogous to forming habits. The first journey in forming habits is the hardest. But once we work through that initial challenge, then it can manifest. So don't give up in those early days. So to answer your question on this, a few things. Obviously, rising early means going to sleep early. From a body perspective, honoring prasadam 3 hours before you take rest is very important. Because when your body is trying to digest prasadam while you're sleeping, you're not getting full, complete sleep. So taking your last meal 3 hours before you plan to take rest will allow your body to rest more completely, which means then you'll need less rest. And then ultimately, pray to Gauranga Mahaprabhu. Yes?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, you explained about the difference between love and lust, the demarcating line. You referred to the cascading effect of love. Can you please briefly describe
The cascading effect of lust?
lust?
Yes. So in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is explaining that, when we develop attachment to material objects, so it starts very softly. Oh, I see this pizza. It's nice. Some attachment. But then that attachment matures into lust. I have to have this. And this really intense desire for lust. But the problem with material desires is that they're never satisfied. Even if I get that pizza, I'll not be happy. And thus, what happens from lust? Anger arises. I become angry because what I wanted did not manifest. And so attachment to lust to anger. And then from anger, everything unfolds. I become bewildered. I lose all of my intelligence. Right? Knowing what is right and what is wrong, but still I do wrong. How many of us have done something we knew was wrong and still did it? It's because we had intense lust for whatever it was. And it ultimately leads to our fall down because we're performing sinful activities ultimately. And so it starts with a very subtle passing glance at a piece of pizza. And next thing you know, I'm breaking into the pizza shop because I have to have it, but I don't have the money for it. And now I'm in jail. That's the cascading effect of lust. And it's 100%. Every material sense object will lead to our destruction. That's the nature of the material world. Yes? Oh, sorry. Prabhuji had his hand up first and then yeah.
Prabhu, you were saying about cooking in festivals and pleasing the devotees, and that's earlier in the lecture. And you were saying that's not the way to conduct yourself, you're just trying to please Krishna. But I understood, and you did say that later in the lecture, that we should try to please Krishna's devotees as pleasing to him. Can you enlighten me on that?
I'm sorry, which is better? Or I'm not sure what the question is.
Earlier in the lecture,
Yep.
you were saying that we should just be trying to please Krishna.
Yes.
If we're cooking in the festivals, like, we'd like to have the
Yep.
say that was great.
Yep.
And then
Understood. I understand your question. So the point is that if my goal is to please Krishna, well then what pleases Krishna most? He says, you can serve me, but what pleases me more is when you serve my devotees. Just like a father walking down the street with his child. If somebody, pleases the father, he's happy. But if somebody pleases his child, how much more happiness that father becomes. Right? So Krishna is more pleased when we serve his devotees. And he says it explicitly. He told Durvasa Muni that. He tells Uddhav in the 11th canto that. So the most perfect way to please Krishna is to please his devotees. So finding that opportunity is there. And again, you can take this to many levels. When I'm serving in a temple environment, we have to work under authority. So if the devotee is telling me, you go to the altar and serve Krishna, well, I'm serving that devotee's responsibility to manage the whole event. And so I'm still serving that devotee through serving the deities. Right? So it's not just, okay, I should avoid all deity service or direct service, but the point is that keeping in mind our opportunity to please Krishna is most enhanced in serving his devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
What's the name of your spiritual master?
Where are you? I don't see. Oh. What is the name of
Your spiritual master.
What's the relevance of that question?
Actually, Prabhuji, sometimes you say it best when you say nothing at all.
I don't follow.
You say it best when you say nothing at all. It's my answer.
Okay. We're all serving here under the glorious mercy of Srila Prabhupada, who has bestowed upon us everything that we need to know to achieve perfection of life. Hare Krishna. Any other questions? Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. My question is, like you discussed about envy. So I want to know, this emotion is by birth or we develop it as we grow? And how can we control it?
Well, envy we have been accumulating since our journey began in this material world. So we have already transgressed millions and millions of lifetimes. So it is not that we are born with zero envy in this body and then we grow it. No, we are bringing our envy from our prior births, so that conditioning carries with us. And that's why it's so deeply rooted. So, we may think, hey, I've been chanting for 2 years and I still have envy. Well, good. We've had millions of lifetimes where we've been building envy. Keep doing it. It will ultimately rid. But envy, we have to become aware of it, right? Two people are talking, and one is glorifying a third person. How do I feel? I feel pain. Why do I feel pain? They're not saying anything bad about me. They're just glorifying somebody else. That's envy. I have to recognize it, and then I can work to eradicate it, right? And so seeing where we're being envious, and again, by following and reading, again, Chaitanya Charitamrita is an amazing illustration because the devotees show this mood of no envy, where envy could be had, right? Haridas Thakur is sitting outside this grand prasadam feast, right? Full of envy. Why is that person there? Don't they know this person doesn't? No, celebrate others' successes. So learn to celebrate others' progress in devotional service. That will help us in freeing us of envy. Okay, Hare Krishna. I think we should end. Hare Krishna. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Hare Krishna.